2023 Russia. The latest disaster blockbuster is shocking. This is also the history of mankind. The first player to dare to confront a natural disaster head-on. The man's name is Oscar, be a hot air balloon explorer. On his 70th birthday, he brought in hundreds of reporters. An important decision was announced. That's just a hot air balloon and 7 days of supplies. Travel the world across 3 oceans. If successful, he will be the first in history. Record-breaking player. Under the cheers of the people across the country, Oscar embarks on a journey around the world. Arriving at an altitude of 19,000 kilometers, the hot air balloon is running normally. The sun shines through the gaps in the clouds. Against the blue sky, everything is beautiful. After reporting to the land personnel that everything was normal, Oscar comes to the outside of the hot air balloon. Turn off all fire-breathing devices, because it has now reached a controllable height. If it continues to rise, cold air may freeze equipment, lead to accidents. Soon the fire-breathing device will be around. It was covered with a thick layer of ice slag. Oscar has extensive experience. I did some simple maintenance on the machine. Machine returns to normal. Wait until night. Hot air balloon propelled by air currents, leaving Russian airspace. The first day of the trip went relatively smoothly. Oscar opens the dry food in the bag. Place on heater to heat. Just took a bite. Time comes to the next day. The hot air balloon traveled 7,300 kilometers at a constant speed. Nearly 1/6 of the way. If we go on at this speed, I estimate that I can travel around the world on the 7th day. Back to Russia. Oscar opens the ration. Just ready to have breakfast. As a result, he was immediately knocked away by a violent shaking. It turned out to be a flamethrower overhead. Affected by the cold snap, a malfunction occurred. At the same time, terrestrial monitoring personnel discovered noise coming from the walkie-talkie. Ask if rescue is needed. Oscar says he can solve it. Reassure them. Come outside the hot air balloon. He used the remaining 4 functioning flamethrowers. Close all, because there is a big thundercloud ahead. If you go in, there is only a dead end in the end. So he had to lower his height to avoid emergency situations. The monitors on the ground felt their hearts in their throats. They were sweating for Oscar. Fortunately, the progress is not too bad. Oscar escaped by luck. Today is the 3rd day of the journey. The hot air balloon traveled 20,900 kilometers. There's still less than half the distance to reach the destination. The closer to the last moment, the less we can relax. Just when Oscar picked up the steel brush, when maintaining the flamethrower, suddenly bad news came from the land personnel. Area 3 kilometers away from him, a giant tornado appeared. At this time, he was driving towards Oscar. Land staff persuaded him to give up traveling around the world, return the same way. Once sucked into a tornado, the consequences could be disastrous. The land personnel advised him that there would be more opportunities in the future. Don't be persistent. But Oscar still rejected the other party's kindness, because he just celebrated his 70th birthday the day before yesterday. It's probably unlikely to happen again in the future. At this moment, he must fight hard. As giant tornado gets closer to hot air balloon, Oscar rushed in with all his strength. Come to the center of the storm. He put the heavy package inside the hot air balloon. Throw it all away. Only by making the hot air balloon light enough to speed up the rise. Cut off the gas tank tie. The jars have been frozen together. Oscar stepped on it directly with his foot. Fortunately, I had a safety rope tied on me. Oscar finally saved his life. Half an hour later, hot air balloon successfully crossed the storm area. It's a miracle, because the oxygen content at high altitude is relatively thin. Oscar lay on the ground unconscious. The sound of a wrench woke him from his sleep. At this time, the device also issued an abnormal alarm. Monitors found the hot air balloon is falling towards the ground at an extremely fast speed. If it cannot be remedied in time, he will soon be with the hot air balloon, fallen to pieces, risking one's life. Oscar came outside to perform emergency repairs on the flamethrower. While he was replacing the gas tank, a gust of wind suddenly hit us. As a result, his foot slipped and he accidentally fell down. With the help of safety rope, Oscar used his last bit of strength to climb up. When going through the cold snap, there is a thick layer of ice on the hot air balloon. It's also because of him. The hot air balloon will plummet. In the process of hitting the rock, the ice layer fell off. To prevent hitting the ground, Oscar controls the hot air balloon. Fly towards the central river, then use full firepower to make the balloon rise. The rhythm is just right. The hot air balloon took Oscar and flew again. He was so generous that he didn't forget to lift the kettle. Get some water for later use. After a long journey, Oscar successfully sailed into Russian airspace. There is another big trouble ahead of us now. That is, there is a huge storm heading towards him. Oscar, who had experienced it once, did not flinch. He is still the same as before. Increased power and rushed in. Whether you live or die this time depends entirely on destiny. Oscar stands on a hot air balloon, like a god of war staring into the storm. Maybe God was moved by his iron will. I saw a huge hole opened by the giant storm, released him and the hot air balloon, went and then joined together again. The long journey lasted 7 days and 7 nights. Oscar finally made it to Russia. He completed the history of mankind, the first person to travel around the world in a hot air balloon. The video ends here.